back to Corporate Nitro.
Corporate Nitro.
I bought 9RC for $350 AU, which is $250 US. People tell me that RC is an expensive hobby, but I really disagree. If you look at the profit and loss summary here, you can see that I've made almost $1,000 and kept the ECX Ruckus, which is a clone of a two-wheel drive Traxxas Stampede, and also I've kept the Bullet, which is one of my favourite nitro trucks.
Welcome back to Corporate Nitro. Heng Long Sprint, 1/10 scale 4-wheel drive nitro touring car. It's a clone of a Kyosho FW05. I can see the pivot ball suspension. Steering servo is seized. It's got a 2-speed there. Gears look okay. Still got the fuel tank, but doesn't have the pipe or the engine mounts. It's got the receiver box. Little battery compartment. Still got the receiver in there because I can see the wire hanging out the back. So all the parts for this should be available on Chinese shopping websites like AliExpress, maybe Banggood. I already noticed I can buy the clutch bell, I can buy the engine mount. All these parts pretty much are available on AliExpress. I couldn't see the engine there, but some hobby shops are selling the VX18 still. So I'll have to add up the numbers and see if it will be worthwhile buying the missing components. It's going to be at least $100 in Australian dollars. So yeah, just need to make up my mind and do the math and see if it's worth it. Otherwise we'll give it a clean and we will get rid of it, because it looks like it could be a few problems here. Alright, so we've got the bad servo out, hooked up a battery to a bad ESC for the purposes of DC to DC voltage regulator, i.e. step down converter, buck converter, UBEC, a million different names. But when checking the voltage with the multimeter, the voltage coming out of the ESC is exactly the same as the voltage coming out of the battery. But that's okay, because my vintage Futaba receiver has got a built-in BEC, so it's dropping the 7.7 volts input from the battery down to 6.3 volts, which is good for these old analog servos. The MGT happens to be on the same brown frequency as my spare vintage Futaba receiver. So yeah, we've got steering. Steering servo is okay. So let's fix this throttle servo and see if we can get some response. Remove the frayed piece of wire. Get the soldering iron out. Pre-tin. Well, that's a success. Not too sure why there's so much glitching. Steering servo's cracked. Alright, we hit a small hurdle as we remove the steering servo, or as we remove the top plate. Steering servo supports snapped off here. So grabbed from my spares box a Colt servo, which looks exactly the same from the outside, almost, which just makes me think that everything is a rebranded Futaba servo. But when I looked closer at it, the spline is different. It's a 25 tooth spline, not a 24 like the Sprint. Okay, looks like all my Savox servos are 25. Alright, so now that we know that the Savox horn is compatible with the Colt servo, what we're going to do with our Shanghai high-speed rotary tool, 15,000 RPM. That'll do me. We'll just cut off the 3 arms that we don't need. Hear the snag again. New servo horn. The holes are too small for the 3mm screw. So get the drill out. Oh, there's the robot. I think that's the VT8000. I wonder if it's left here by the robotics team. It must be. Maybe we can wake it up using some voice commands. VT8000, wake up.
VT8000, at your command cell.
Oh wow, I need to Google some more voice commands. Alright, so I've just downloaded the user manual for the VT8000 robot, and we're going to see if it can follow some voice commands. We're going to look at this VX18 Nitro engine that I purchased online, and we're going to go through the contents now that the box has arrived. VT8000, take this box. Start taking things out of the box. Okay, what have we got there? That's engine mounts. Now we've got the clutch bell, flywheel, more engine mounts. We've got some fuel tube. We've got a header. We've got a coupler. Oh, we've got the VX18 engine. Take out the VX18 engine. Oh yeah, an air filter. And hold up the VX18 engine. Wow, look at that. That's a nice engine. It's got a pull start. It's got a glow plug already in there. I've already measured it. It's a short hot plug, an N3. It's got a rotary carb, and we are very excited to get this engine running because it's come with so much. It's also got an exhaust pipe as well, and soon we'll get this all put together and throw it on the car. Okay, VT8000, please put the engine back in the bubble wrap. VT8000, go back to sleep mode. VT8000, will you obey every command that I say?
Yes, sir.
Bark like a dog.
Bark like a dog.
Yip, yip.
A big dog.
Woof, 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 woof.
Like a big dog.
Woof, woof, woof.
Hop on one leg.
Woof, 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 woof.
Hop on one foot.
Woof, woof, woof.
I did buy the Vertex VX18 for the Heng Long Sprint, but this being a cheap touring car, and I'm not sure if I'm going to put a brand new engine on a cheap touring car. Maybe I'll use this engine on the Hyper 10 Pro, which is a nice carbon fiber chassis, and it got more cutouts in the chassis that look good. Anyway, let's say I was going to do it. So I bought the engine, and I bought the engine mount that's supposed to come with this chassis, even though very similar engine mounts came with the engine. But when you go and mount it, the first thing that I notice is that these little screws that hold the pull start on hit the engine mount, and even if you back them out a little bit like I have, you're still hitting the engine mount. I can't get these holes to line up. You see, this is too far back. I can't get close enough. They're almost lining up, but they're not really lining up. So I'm gonna have to mark out with a pen, okay, roughly where I need to drill a bit of this material out so I can slide this motor forward. Otherwise I'll have no adjustability. Let's do that now. Now I've marked out with a pen where the material needs to be removed. I'm not even sure how I'm going to remove this material. You can't drill it, so I might have to use the air file and push against it. Okay, so we've just taken the pull start off this VX18 just to take a few measurements. It's the standard 27mm between the screws. Okay, it's got 4 screws, 27mm. And the other measurement I wanted to take was the one-way bearing. I wanted to see how big the hex nut was. If it was a 12, yep, looks like it is. So it's going to be compatible with a lot of other engines that I've got, which is good news. I can buy this pull start very cheap from China. It's going to fit a lot of my engines. Believe it or not, this cheap Chinese engine is actually using a German one-way bearing. Unbelievable. You'd think that they'd be using a real cheap, nasty one-way bearing made in China. I'm going to put this VX18 together. Well, just the clutch. And this is a bit embarrassing. I actually don't know how these pilot shafts go together. It looks like this kind of grabs the flywheel because it's got a groove, but I'm not sure if this little nut needs to be removed first. Alright, so I decided to remove this little nut and then screw on the pilot shaft to the pilot shaft, or the clutch section, whatever the name is, got no idea. Then I put the plastic nylon clutch shoes on. Then I tried to put the spring around and tried to connect the spring together, but I had no luck. So then I just connected the spring together and slide the spring over, and that worked fine. So I guess now's the part where we put the E-clip on there. So we'll try that now. Well, we're slowly making some progress. So I slide the clutch bell on, and now I can see a massive recess. Normally with my SG shafts they slide out and then I shim them, but with this one I think maybe the screw just goes straight on. So if it does, then this is the only screw that's floating around here. Doesn't come with a washer, which is a bit of a concern. Then again, maybe not. Maybe it just needs to stop the bearing from falling off. So we'll give that a go, see what happens. Alright, so I'm starting to regret buying the engine mount for the Heng Long Sprint, because the mounts that came with the engine seem to be a better fit because they can screw straight in, whereas this one here I have marked where I have to cut it out just so that this little part of the case here doesn't smash into here. So I'm going to keep going with the ones that come with, and then we'll try and mount to the chassis. Alright, total disaster. We've put the engine into position and it does not line up with the holes, not even close to the holes. So I've put the bell and the spurs together, they're meshing nicely, nice and tight. But then look at that, these do not line up at all. So maybe I do have to use the mount that came with the chassis, not the mounts that came with the engine. And look at that, that pull start is right on the limit. It's touching the hinge pin retainer there. Alright, let's swap over, see what happens. So we've decided we need to remove a bit of material to get this engine mount to fit. So I've marked out roughly how much material I need to cut out. We'll get the high-speed rotary tool from AliExpress. I'll probably get the hardest thing that I've got is probably this cutting wheel, and we'll see if we can get rid of it. After a lot of work with the file, we've managed to take out heaps of material, heaps of aluminium from this mount, so that the VX18 can finally sit on top. So the most critical part is lining up the gears. The biggest problem is here. These engine mounts do not line up at all on this chassis. So if I have to make a aluminium plate, that's going to raise the height of the engine mounts. But I'm thinking a little adapter plate might be a great idea, considering we're not going to be able to use a bump box because this flywheel is miles away from the chassis. Now I've had this motor mount for over a year, and I only just discovered about a day ago that the holes are not even tapped. So we've got a 3mm tap here. This is a Tamiya 3mm thread tapper, and it might look like a normal screw, but it's only when you look at it from this angle you'll see it's not perfectly round. It's squared off on the sides, and that's to let the material escape the threads. So let's do this by hand. Alright, so we've already grabbed the 2.5mm drill bit, verified that that's a 2.5mm hole, which is the right size if you're tapping a 3mm thread. So I've been given a lend of a tap wrench which holds the tap, and I've also been given a lend of a proper intermediate or tapper's tap. Tapper's tap is to start the thread, intermediate is to get it going, and then the plug or bottom tap is the last one, which doesn't have this tapered tip. It's more of a just comes to a sudden stop, and that's for what you use in a blind hole. When you don't have a hole all the way through, you don't have complete access, your hole just comes to a stop, you have to use the plug. So we've got the intermediate. We don't even know if it's an M3, so what we'll do is we'll get an M3 screw, see if the threads match, and maybe what we'll do, we'll even do a test hole. So I've drilled 2.5 here. We'll use that tap and see what kind of pitch it creates. So we grab an existing M3 screw, we line up the suspected 3mm tap. The threads seem to match perfectly, so what we'll do is we'll put this tap into the tap wrench, and then we'll start making a hole to see how hard it is to tap, get a bit of practice tapping because I haven't done it before, see what kind of thread it creates, do we need lube, and so forth. So the tap has gone in like butter. Next step, let's put a 3mm screw on the end of the hex driver and see if that goes in, or let's see if we actually have to use the bottom tap, okay, the plug, to finish off this thread. Let's see what happens. Oh yeah, that's nice. That's not going anywhere. So it seems that if you've got the hole going all the way through, the intermediate one is fine that I've been using. No jiggle at all. So when we get to these blind holes where we don't have the hole all the way through, we might actually have to use the Tamiya one that's got the flat tip on the end. Forward and back. Alright, let's clean the flutes. So now that we've done the 4 holes with the intermediate tap, which is tapered and comes to a point, now we're going to change over to the bottom tap, or the plug as it's known, which has a flat bottom, no point. Okay, this is what you use for the blind holes. Look, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert at tapping. It's only the first time I've ever done it. But yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm a big deal now. I'm pretty hot shot at tapping. So 3mm intermediate tap, mark the little line on how far we can go, put it into the proper tapping wrench, numbered my holes so that I know which one I'm up to, put a little bit of downward pressure, and I think the trick is just to turn and then back it off, and then turn and then back it off. If you keep doing that, I think you just can't go wrong, because it's the aluminium, it's soft like butter. I guess the hardest trick is keeping it vertical, because it hits your knuckles all the time. The VX18 has got the cone and then the flywheel, and then there's a threaded shaft because this is a standard crankshaft. Then there's the integrated clutch nut pilot shaft all in one, screws onto the thread of the standard shaft. So that's the pilot shaft there. Then you put your two-piece nylon clutch with spring. Then you put your inner bearing, your clutch bell, and your E-clip, and then your screw. That's how it all goes together. No, you cannot cut the threaded shaft to make the whole thing shorter. This is just a very long engine. It's just a shame that it's a small block so long. It won't fit on standard small block mounts, so it can only be used in some trucks. So I've been wondering how to clean the fuel tank on this because it was full of all this green slime down the bottom. Put in a bit of fluff in there, moved it around, and we got a lot of it out. And look at this one. It's bloody Slimer from the Ghostbusters. That's what happens when you leave fuel in your tank. It just goes hard. Alright, so we've got two choices when mounting the engine. Now that we've tapped, we've got the blocks on, but we still need to make a little plate, maybe 45 by 45, something like that. So we can go with some real thin aluminium, 1.6mm. I think this is going to be too thin, but if we double it up, that'll work. Or we can go with 3mm aluminium, and 3mm is the same thickness as the chassis, so I'm thinking this one might be better. Okay, we've measured out the piece we're going to cut. It is 46 by 42. I think that's going to be the right dimensions. Let's get the grinder and have a crack. Alright, we've cut the piece out, 46 by 42. Next, it's time to get the file and start cleaning it up so it's not so sharp. Start using some of these big files here. So we got the plate. I tried gluing it down, but it's still sliding around too much. So we're just going to put some tape on there. Then we're going to throw the whole thing in the vise. And we're going to make some marks from the bottom side, because the bottom side has already got the 4 slots. So we just need to make some holes. Alright, we've got the chassis in the vise. What we're going to do is we can see 2 holes exposed. So we're going to drill 2.5 through the aluminium so that then we can tap the aluminium to the 3mm. You now put 4 holes and connect the mount to the plate. Now that we've got all the holes done, we've got the 4 holes done in the middle, we've got the 4 holes done here. Now we can start putting it all together. So we're going to use countersunk screws. Time to tap. Alright, making some progress. We've got the engine back on. Had a little bit of weirdness with the screws in the bottom because one of the screws is really sticking out a lot. Almost forgot to put the gasket here on the header. I just rolled the wheels and they weren't turning. They did turn, but they were very stiff. And so I've adjusted the two Phillips screws here, which puts pressure on the brake rotor. And as soon as I loosen these screws, the wheels are rolling so freely. The whole chassis rolls so freely. Mazda 6, Heng Long Sprint, Mazda 6, or some kind of Dodge concept car, CTS or whatever the hell it's called before the Viper came out. Which one should I put on the Kyosho FW05 clone? Alright, so the winner is, out of the Mazda 6 and the Dodge Viper GTSR concept car, the winner is the Dodge Viper. And the reason for that is that the longer front means it'll go over the foam bumper, whereas the Mazda 6 comes around quite sharp and we'll have to cut so much of the front bumper off. I didn't want to do that. The other reason is the Dodge Viper is a more desirable, more rare, more impressive car, and I'd rather see that hit the road in my videos than a Mazda 6, even though the Mazda 6 is the best car in the world. Put tube on for the pressure line. We got it on. Pressure line is on. Alright, so I've just loosened the fuel tank so that we can get the fuel tube on to the nipple at the bottom. We got the fuel tubes on, and just before we go and throw on the original linkage for the throttle, we actually want to zero off the servos. So that means we unflap the flaps. So I grabbed my spare Futaba receiver, and we can easily fit the receiver in here with my little life pack battery, but I want to mount the aerial through the hole in there, and then it comes up through here. But then I've noticed that the original antenna wire is snapped and it's stuck in there, so I've stabbed it with this huge pin, and we're pulling it out, so that was snapped off in there. Now, I've played with rotary carbs once or twice before. I'm not really familiar with them, but I can see that this one here controls the idle gap, and very similar to a slide carb, you screw it in to get more idle gap, and you back it off to get less idle gap. So obviously throttle is to push this lever away. So when we put this guy on, to the left is going to be throttle open, and to pull it will be the brake. So let's just make sure that when we pull the trigger here, that it goes to the left when we pull the throttle. No, it's going the wrong way. We're going to have to go into the menu and do some reversing. And now we pull the trigger. That's correct. When we brake, it pulls it. Perfect. So we might go and play with some more settings. Maybe turn the idle up feature to help with starting. Throttle linkage doesn't fit through the throttle arm. It's just one problem after another, isn't it? Anyway, we'll get the drill out. We'll fix that up. Now that we cut out this piece to make a cooling hole for the head, maybe we can glue this in the back here. All right, we've got a nice sunny day. Let's do the braking on this new Vertex VX18. All right, that's done. We've set up our endpoints for steering and for throttle. We can get full throttle, we can get full brake without stressing the car. We've also set up our fail-safe, so if this transmitter stops sending, bang, the brakes come on straight away. We've also set up our voltage failsafe, so not just the transmitter voltage that will alarm if that gets low, but also the voltage of the receiver pack. If that gets below 5.3, I'll get an alarm, and actually I'll go into failsafe, so that's good. The other thing we'll do now is we'll heat up the head using an engine warmer, connect the to a computer power supply. So we turn on the computer power supply, and then we turn on the engine heater. We've got 12 volts. So now we'll wait a few minutes and that engine should get up to 80 degrees C. Right, so for the braking, I want to use something low in nitro and high in oil. So I won't use 25% fuel, it's a bit too high in the nitro. 16 nitro, that's nice and low, but it's only got 10 oil, it's too low. We might have to go to some vintage fuels. Okay, what do we got here? We've got, it doesn't say what oil content is. And this one here, it says 20% nitro, it's a bit too high. This one here, 16 nitro, 16 oil, still the nitro is too high. And this one here, 10% nitro, 20% oil. Very low nitro, very high oil. That's going to be the one we use for this break-in today. Alright, let's see if this thing will even start up. Priming nicely, I can see the fuel. The head is warm. Okay, bit of glow, and we should be good. Give it a bit more throttle using the idle up feature. Should we prime it some more? Battery's disconnected. This is really bad. This means we could have a runaway. Now there's a lot of fuel around the glow plug. Does that mean we're loose? How loose are we? Oh yeah. That was really loose. Check the compression now. Oh wow, we've got some serious compression now. Oh, ready to start. Yeah. Right, well, that was too lean because I couldn't stop the wheels from turning. So let's go and richen the high and the low so that we're not getting wheels turning on us. Okay, so to richen the low's on this side. Okay, and I guess we're going to richen the high as well. And if that doesn't bring the idle down, then we'll start messing with the idle gap. But right now, I'm not going to mess with the idle gap. Well, a bit better. we're doing the break-in. This is tank 1. And that was tank 3. Tank 3. Now when you look at the air filter, it looks like it's fine. But when you watch it through the camera, you can see how much it's wobbling. Looks like we lowered the idle a little bit too much, which has caused the engine to stall. Let's drain some oil out now. Something interesting has happened. 2 screws have come out that's holding the engine mount plate to my support plate. So while those 2 screws came out in the front there, the whole engine is rocking back and forward. That's going to mess with our throttle action, our brakes, and also it's going to mess with our mesh. So we need to take this engine out, put some red Loctite in there or some blue Loctite at minimum, and then try this again. So the new cap head screws have arrived, so I figured I would get rid of the crappy Phillips head screw, and when doing so the screw bent, and when it bent it snapped, leaving half the screw in there. So I've been trying to drill it out, but when I try and drill it out it just makes a mess of the aluminium and goes at a weird angle. So now I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll just cut the gasket off, okay, throw this header in the bin and get a spare one and use that instead. I don't know where this came from, but I've actually got exactly the same header spare in my collection of parts. Alright, we've got the spare header back on. No Loctite because I don't want to snap the bolts again if I have to get it out one day. I just noticed that I didn't ever put this on. Thanks to the Nitro gang for telling me that that goes on here. Can you blow in the stinger to prime an engine? Normally I charge people to go to my OnlyFans site to see these kind of RC BJs. This time I'm going to give you a freebie. Yes, you can blow in the stinger to prime your engine. It's the easiest, quickest way. Well, that was a bit of a disaster. It was very hard to start, and the flywheel has eventually given up and come off the crank. Do we need to do a bit of an investigation? Is the clutch nut loose? Is this silver part here, is that the problem? That grub screws come loose? Just investigating why we believe the flywheel is loose. First thing I noticed is that the E-clip was fallen off. It had come off the clutch nut. Seems to be a bit of damage to the new clutch nut, so that's not good. Do we have to change this? Do we have to try a different E-clip, bit tighter one? So that's one thing. The other thing is, why was this all loose? All right, so this little flywheel grabber, I don't know what you would call it, flywheel grabber, it seems to grab the flywheel, okay, is keyed onto the crank, onto the standard shaft. So that could not have come loose. I don't know why I thought this came loose, but that's not possible to come loose. Okay, so that's keyed on there. It is on there. So next goes the flywheel. All right, so can that come loose? Yes, that can come loose if there's not enough grip on there. So to get enough grip on there, you have to do up your clutch nut pretty tight. Okay, but it's not actually a clutch nut. It is a pilot shaft. Pilot shaft, clutch nut, all integrated into one. Okay, so this is the opposite of an SG shaft. Two pieces make the entire shaft. So if this was loose, then the flywheel could be spinning. Okay, that's all I can think. This actually wasn't loose, but could it have been tighter? I don't know. All right, I'm already regretting buying this cheap Chinese engine. This E-clip is really loose. It keeps falling off the pilot shaft. I'm going to squeeze it a bit in the pliers to make it a bit tighter. Now we've squeezed the E-clip to give it a bit more tension, and we've popped it back onto that pilot shaft. It seems to be grabbing really good now, so we can put this engine back together. Okay, all back together, ready to finish this break-in, hopefully once and for all. Still doing the braking. Okay, let's check the fuel levels. Oh, it's already hit second gear. Did you hear it?
Mm-hmm.
Now.
Mm-hmm. It was so clear.
That's a promotion. Corporate Nitro, promotion in second gear. Whoa, too close, too close. Watch those gutters. Watch the poles, watch the gutters. Watch the people, watch the bikes, watch the scooters. Oh, the tyre came off. You got the Dodge Viper. This is the GTS prototype. Running rich. Richer than Dodge Automotive. Dodge GTS prototype Viper, doing the break-in with the Vertex VX18. VX18. We've got the 2-speed in the Heng Long Sprint. Because we're doing the break-in, we can hit second gear, but we're not pushing the throttle. A lot of smoke. We're using 18 to 20% oil. The car is sitting low. It's got 3 rubber touring car tyres and 1 foam on the front left. because we shredded one tyre last week. Don't cross the stream, don't hit the pole. When you break in a car, an engine, the fuel just lasts forever. It takes like 20 minutes to do a tank, maybe 25. Because you're driving so efficiently. No full throttle. And never touching the brake. I think I've worked out why I keep stripping the gears on this 2-speed transmission. It's because we made a custom plate for the engine, and that has the side effect of raising the height of the engine. So we've raised the height of the engine 2 mil, but we haven't raised the height of the transmission 2 mil. So the center of the clutch bell, which is the screw, is actually 2 mil higher than the center of the transmission, which wouldn't make any issue for the dog bones going to the front and rear transmission gear case. But for the gears themselves, this presents a big issue because they must line up on the center plane perfectly. Otherwise, you're going to be having one mesh with one gear and a different mesh with the other gear. So the second gear is lining up perfectly, but the first gear is too far away. So by raising the height to 2 mil, it's going to bring them back on the same plane. I was talking to the president of the Nitro gang, Dimitri, and he said instead of making a custom plate to go here, why don't you just shim the transmission up a bit higher? So we found some 1 mil spacers. We're going to use 2 of them on each screw, and that should raise the height 2 millimeters. Now we can see that we've got these little 1 millimeter spacers in position, 2 on each screw. So the transmission is ready to go in. Here we go, just making an exhaust gasket for the header out of an old tag. Come out nice, eh?